continuing in the series of Joshua. And today we're going to be looking at faith to commit. Faith to commit. And this is about renewing the covenant. God is renewing his covenant with them. And so when we look at faith to commit, then the mindset should be this as we look at God renewing the covenant before they go in to Jericho, is that a covenant is, it's a two-way street. A covenant says it's a promise, agreement, a pledge, or contract. It involves two or more parties who come together to make a contract. Covenants can specify what activities will or will not be carried out. So this is how it goes when God is making covenants with us. We are in agreement. So he takes care of his portion of it, and we are supposed to take care of ours. So he upholds his side, we're supposed to uphold our side. And so we're going to be looking at Joshua chapter 5 this morning and just seeing how things went with God renewing this covenant. And remember, it's the faith to commit, because you are committing to this covenant that God has laid before you. And so we are going to read through Joshua chapter 5. And it says, as soon as all the kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the people of Israel until they had crossed over, their hearts melted, and there was no longer any spirit in them because of the people of Israel. At that time, the Lord had said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath Haraloth. And this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the males of the people who came out of Egypt, all the men of war had died in the wilderness on the way after they had come out of Egypt. Though all the people had come out and had been circumcised, yet all the people who were born on the way in the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the people of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness until all the nation, the men of war who came out of Egypt, perished because they did not obey the voice of the Lord. The Lord swore to them that he would not let them see the land that the Lord had sworn to their fathers to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So it was their children whom he raised up in their place that Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. When the circumcising of the whole nation was finished, they remained in their place in the camp until they were healed. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I roll away the reproach of Egypt from you. And so the name of that place is called Gilgal to this day. While the people of Israel were encamped at Gilgal, they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month in the evening in the plains of Jericho. And the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. And the manna ceased the day after they ate the produce of the land, and there was no longer manna for the people of Israel. But they ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with a drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshiped, and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. and Joshua did so. So, once again, this is preparation before they go into Jericho. And this is the renewing of the covenant, because this covenant was originally put in place when they were leaving out of Egypt in the beginning. And so when we look at God's covenant, so I want us, once again, as we always walk through and we're looking at this, we look at ourselves and see what is going on with the covenant that God has placed before us. Do we look at it in a proper manner? And so the first thing about God's covenant is God's covenant is special. His covenant is special because these were his chosen people. And so it began in Exodus chapter 2, verses 23 through 24. It says, during those days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. So, as we look at this, they cried out to God, and these were God's people, and so he answered. And so this begins the process of when he decided to bring Moses in and have Moses lead them out of Egypt. And so when we look at ourselves with God and his covenant, we have to understand that's special. Everybody doesn't have that covenant with God. That's why there are believers and non-believers. And when you look out in the world a lot of times now, everyone is acting like everyone is the same, or everybody is interchangeable, when we should know, if nothing else, that that is not true. But many times if we're not careful and focused on the covenant, then we will be doing the same thing. We will find ourselves behaving like the world, but because we go to church or because we send out scriptures on Facebook, that we are where we need to be. But it's like, no, God is choosing them because they are special. He has a relationship with them. And so we look at that. Do we feel that special relationship with God when we are interacting with him? Or is it just, you feel like you're just going through the motions? But the people in the land, they heard what was going on. They saw that God was different than all of the other gods that they were claiming out there. They saw what God was doing for the Israelites, so they knew they were special. But sometimes when we're in that covenant with God, we don't look at that and we don't see that we're special and that God's covenant is special. And so therefore we have to cultivate that. We have to protect that. It's just like a marriage. Once again, this is something special. This is only shared between you and your wife or you and your husband. Nobody else is a part of this. And so that is just totally set apart. And number two, God's covenant is specific. God's covenant is specific. You know, there are certain things that we are called to do. And so now, within this situation with Joshua, God is reinstituting circumcision and the Passover. So remember, these things were instituted before they left Egypt. And now, remember, they went into the wilderness and then they died off because they didn't go in and take the land to begin with. So all of them died off, and now Joshua, who was one of the ones who went to spy out the land, and he brought back a good report. And so now he's the one who's going to lead them in. So God is reestablishing this covenant. And so we look at verses 2 through 5. It says, at that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath Haaraloth. And this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the males of the people who came out of Egypt, all the men of war had died in the wilderness on the way after they had come out of Egypt. Though all the people who came out had been circumcised, yet all the people who were born on the way in the wilderness after they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. So he's reinstituting this. So the first time we see circumcision is with Abraham in Genesis chapter 17, verse 9 through 11. And it says, and God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. So once again, this is his covenant. Now, we can't go into, or we shouldn't have to always go into why did he choose this covenant. But more or less, this is the covenant that he chose, and that we need to line up with the covenant that he has placed before us. And so now we see Joshua here in chapter 5, verses 10 through 12. It says, while the people of Israel were encamped at Gilgal, and they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month in the evening on the plains of Jericho. And the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. And the manna ceased the day after they ate the produce of the land. And there was no longer manna for the people of Israel, but they ate the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So they kept Passover as well. So remember, when they were leaving out of Egypt, they had the Passover. He told them, look, we're getting ready to leave. We're not going to have time to let everything bake and cook and get everything in order. So look, we doing this unleavened bread. All this, we just getting straight to the point so you can eat, and then we can leave out. He put everything in place. He told them about putting the blood over the doorways of the houses so the spirit of death would pass over them. As he had said, it would take the firstborn of the people in Egypt who didn't have the blood over the post of the house. And so when you look at that, God is coming back, and he's saying that I'm putting this back into place. So it's specific. These are the things I'm telling you that you need to do. You need to reinstitute circumcision, and you need to do the Passover. Now, one thing that changed here when they did the Passover, it says that they ate from the produce of the land at this point. They ate from the produce of the land, and the manna stopped. So remember, all the time while they were in the wilderness, God was still providing for them. He was still providing manna for them. But now that they are going into the land, now they are eating of the produce of the land that he had told them about 40 years prior. 40 years prior, that this was a land flowing with milk and honey. And now this transition is taking place. But as I said, with God's covenant, it's specific. So we have to ask ourselves, are there specific things that God is asking us to do within the covenant he has with us? There are certain things he has called us to. There are certain ways he has called us to carry these things out. And when you look in Scripture a lot of times, many times, you see things that don't make sense. Like we're going to see next week with Jericho, with how he had them bring down the walls of Jericho. Didn't make any sense. And I know you just think about the military forces nowadays. If they said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get the band. Let's get the band out here. We're going to have the band walk around. And they like, okay, then we're going to shoot the missiles? No. We're going to bring in the tanks? No. We're going to walk around the city, and we're going to play instruments, and we're going to blow the horn and yell. What do you think they would be thinking? They would just be like, this guy's in charge? This is the one that we are following into battle? No, come on. But remember, with God, remember, we are, it says we are unusual people. We are just pilgrims passing through. This does not go with the norm. This does not go with how things are laid out. So when God puts something before us, and I've heard testimonies before, and I have testimonies myself where it's like, it did not make sense, but I did it. It didn't make sense, but I did it because that's what God told me to do. That's how he told me to do. That's when he told me to do it. And then he showed me something magnificent. And I'm like, wow, never would have thought. But it's just the fact that he has given us these specific things just to see if he's showing us, I'm honoring my part of the covenant. All I'm asking you to do is just trust me and follow along. And so he gave them these specific things in the covenant. And as you see, Joshua listened. We don't see where Joshua said, God, are you sure that we need to reinstitute this? You sure we don't just need to go in and take the land? No, what he laid before him, he followed it, and he didn't question God. And so the third one is God's covenant cannot be substituted. God's covenant cannot be substituted. And so within this, I want us to think of, like I said, we just talked about it being specific. How many times we want to try and do it a different way? So when you look at the word substitute, it says to replace or to put or use in place of another. It makes me think about recipes. Now, I always talk about how I am not a cook. I'm not a cook, not a chef, any of that, but I am great at following directions. I'm great at following directions, and so like if I'm making a cake or something like that, whatever it says on there, that's what I'm doing. But I see sometimes where it says you can use this or you can substitute it with this here. It gives you a choice where you can use this or you can use this. That's fine. But I have never been working on a recipe, and then as it's laid it out, says for me to use something, then I say, you know what? I think I'm going to use this instead. I think it'll turn out great. I think it'll turn out great. We all know that if you do things like that, people don't hold back when they're like, who made this mess? They're going to like, what you do? Oh, I substituted this, but you need to stick to the recipe next time. And so this is the thing with God. They want to substitute what they wanted to do. Remember when Moses was on the mountain inquiring of God, and they just like, hey, why don't we throw a party? Why don't we make a golden calf? And it's like, hey, this is your God that brought you out of Egypt. They substituting the golden calf for God. How did that turn out for them? Didn't turn out so well. When God told them to go in, spy out the land, it was flowing with milk and honey, go in and take the land. What did they say? Oh no, it's giants out there. I don't know. We look like grasshoppers compared to the giants in the land, and they didn't go in. And they ended up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years because instead of trusting God and what he told them to do, they trusted in themselves and went off of their decisions and what they saw in the natural. And it's kind of ironic that when they didn't follow God and listen to God, and they were sitting up talking about, oh, the people in the land, they are giants, and they were fearful. But this is how the people are talking about them right now. This is how the people are talking about them right now. So when we decide that we want to substitute what God has told us to do and do what we want to do or go off what we're feeling, you see what happens within that situation. So they were not acting like, they were not acting like the people who had just been brought out of Egypt, who saw 10 plagues be carried out against the Egyptians, one by one by one. And they just sat there and watched. They didn't suffer through any of the plagues. They saw God's glory. He parted the Red Sea. And now, when you get over here and he tells you, go in and take the land, now you say, whoa, the people are tall, they big, I don't understand that. Think about when we just trust in God when he puts something before us. Once again, I know we all have those triumph stories and we all have those failures. If not, talk to me, I have plenty of them. To where I decided that I wanted to try something different and it didn't turn out well. But if they just follow what God is telling them to do, they don't have any issues. And remember, once again, Joshua was one of the ones who gave a great report. He said, we need to go in and take the land. God has given the land to us. Let's go. And they like, okay, slow down, young man. Let's just slow it down. Let's slow it down. Let's think about this. And he like, what? What are we thinking about? God told us this. But then they like, no, we think this. So instead of doing that, we're going to substitute this thing. So ask yourself, is there anything within your life where you're substituting what God told you? You're replacing it. You're changing it up a little bit and think that it's going to be okay. But I hope you take the mindset now to where just trust him and see it through when he puts that thing before you and just see how it turns out. Because as I said, most of the time when I try to do things like that and it doesn't turn out so well, then I get my courage back and get back on track. Then God, he looks at me like, if you would have just done that to begin with, you wouldn't have had any of these issues. And so now we move on to the fourth point. God's covenant is serious. God's covenant is serious. So this is not to be taken lightly when we are in covenant with God. It's not to be taken lightly. So in Joshua chapter 5, verses 13 and 14, it says, when Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshiped him and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? So this is serious that an angel of the Lord appeared to Joshua. Do you think God will be wasting his time to appear just if this was just no big deal? But once again, this is preparation before they go into the land and take Jericho. He's pulling out all stops. He's taking their memory back to say, remember when you first came out of Egypt, we put these things into place and you all were doing good up to that point. And then that's when I made the decision that you all had to wilderness for 40 years to that generation who doubted and didn't want to listen dies off, and now this new generation, I'm going to have them go in and take the land. So he reinstituted circumcision. He reinstituted the Passover to let them know the importance of it, to make them remember why they are here to begin with, where it all started. And now here he is standing before Joshua. This is serious business. I know we talk about seeing God in different situations, and I can't speak for you, but I don't take it lightly. You know, I know sometimes I see different things within where I'm like, that's God working through that. That's God. I see God. You know, for me, it's always God's timing. It's always God's timing. You know, a lot of times people expect something spectacular, you know, like he's going to, like he's going to stop the sun like he did and be like, okay, I'm going to give you a little sun. But no, it's just his timing to where sometimes, you know, it's like, hey, he had that happen right here because I would have been at home at that time. But then I had this opportunity where I saw this person and was able to connect and help them, or they helped me with something, whatever it may have been. I see God within that situation. So I take that serious when I'm seeing God at work in my life. I know sometimes people be talking to me about certain things going on. I'm like, that's God. That's not just a coincidence. That's not just something going along. That's God. God is at work here, and this is the time to pay attention. Like when you hear things over and over, like I may be talking about something, and then next thing you know, my wife brings up something, then I'll hear something on the radio, and I'm like, I'm just kind of like Samuel. Okay, God, I'm listening. I'm listening. Here I am. You know, because he wants us to pay attention. If he is taking his time to communicate with us in some shape, form, or fashion, we need to take that serious. And so here Joshua is, and he's ready for war. And he sees him and like, okay, you with us or you against us? You know, because Joshua wants to know, if you with us, okay. But if you're against us, it's not going to go so well for you, because we getting ready to go in and take Jericho. And even in Exodus chapter 2, verses 2 and 4, he appeared to Moses in the burning bush. And it says, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, here I am. So once again, Moses is just going along, and he sees this bush burning. And he said, it's burning, but it's not burning up. Something peculiar is going on here. And so this is where he made the connection with Moses before he sent him down to Egypt to set the people free from Egypt. So this is important. And think about that. What if Moses wasn't paying attention, where he's just like, that's odd, and just kept walking along? Oh, that's odd. The bush is burning, but it's not burning. I'm going to tell my father-in-law about this when I get back to the house. Be like, man, it was this bush out here. And no, that's something. He like, something is going on here. I need to get a closer look. And as he came up to get that closer look, that's when God called out to him, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Is God calling out to anyone today? And we need to say, here I am? Because I got a feeling after this sermon, some of us are going to be thinking about it and say, you know what? I didn't think about it that way, but I think that was God who was putting something on my heart. I'm not going to say he audibly talks to everybody. I don't want you to feel that. I mean, he was talking to Moses here audibly, but, you know, sometimes he puts things on our hearts. We see things. We have that sense of him being a part of the situation. And so he takes these things very serious. And so the last part of God's covenant is God's covenant is sacred. God's covenant is sacred. Too many times I feel too many times we see that people just act like, God is just a part of everything else. It's no big deal. That instead of it being sacred and we are set aside for a dedicated service to God, that it's like, yeah, I can participate or not participate, or God knows my heart. All these little things versus taking something sacred. And when you look at it, I think when you look at it in that manner, that kind of changes everything. It does for me. So in Joshua chapter 5, verse 15, it says, "And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, 'Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy.' And Joshua did so." In Exodus chapter 2, verse 4 and 5, says, "When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, 'Moses, Moses,' and he said, 'Here I am.' Then he said, 'Do not come near. Take off your sandals. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground.'" So it's preparation once again. This is sacred. I'm calling you to do a service for me as the Lord. So this is not just something that is no big deal. This is not just something to where you just kind of gloss over it. This is something to be held in high esteem. He didn't even want them, because some of us would look at it like, what's the big deal? I don't feel like taking my shoes off right now. But God said this is holy ground. But we know this from our brother John Michael, who lives it out when he preaches, and that's what he said. I feel this is holy ground, and he preaches without his shoes on. That's giving God that true reverence. That true reverence that you know who he is, and that our service and worship unto him, that we know this is like none other, that we know this is something that is different, and that we have to really sit at his feet and see what it is he is trying to convey to us. And so I'll close with this. I think I've given the testimony before, or talked about it, how years ago, when my wife and I were married, we took our first road trip to see her cousin in Omaha, Nebraska. And so while we were driving down the highway, we had been married maybe about close to, a year or something like that. And so as we were driving, we were kind of discussing putting our finances in order. And then we were putting everything, all the bills we had and everything. And then, we had, while we were talking, then it's like we telling all of the things. And then it's like, we got tithes and offerings and everything. And then as we're going through this, like, no, tithes and offerings, that need to be at the top of the list. That need to be at the top of the list, and all the other things trickle down. And so as we were driving along, shortly after that, I made that statement, then we were driving and I saw this Covenant truck. It's a trucking company out of, I believe, I won't say Memphis or something like that, but it's a covenant truck. It shows like the picture of like the map of the world, and then it has like a scroll right in the middle of this covenant truck. And so the thing of it is that over all of these years, I usually see it most of the time when we are traveling, when we are going back and forth. And so I'm always looking out for this truck now. And so for me, I've always taken that as, okay, this is a communication between me and God, because we were putting this in place. This is a covenant with me and my wife. And I'm like, no, God needs to be first. And I feel like here comes the truck. Like, yeah, you right, son. Keep that covenant. Keep it in order. And so usually, as I said, I see these trucks when we're on the road, and usually it's when, there have been times also to where like something is going on and I'm looking for answers, and it needs to be something put in order. So it's not just me just seeing the truck a lot of the time. And so when I see it, then I'll instantly go into prayer. God, okay, I see you're showing me this truck. You talking, you getting my mind back on the covenant. You getting my mind back on the covenant with you. And so I get back focused on those things, and I get into prayer, and God always comes through. So I always look at that, when I see those trucks. And this is, this has been like about 23 years. We'll be married 23 years in August, and I still always see these trucks every time we go out on the road, and I see them locally sometime too. And once again, now I say to myself, because that's why I say I don't just look at it like this is just something happening, because most of you be like, okay, what's the big deal? Trucks drive everywhere. But the thing of it is, we stay here with Anheuser-Busch. We stay here with Walmart, all these local things, and I see these trucks more often than not than the things that, the trucks that you would expect to see on a regular basis. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, yeah, okay, what's the big deal with a truck sighting? It may be just for me, but you may have something like that going on to where God has a covenant going on with you. And so I just encourage you to just pay attention to these things. Remember, God's covenant with us is special. God's covenant with us is specific. There are specific things we are called to do. And we are not to substitute anything for what God has put in place. We need to follow that. We need to take it serious, not lightly. We need to take it serious and take care and protect it. And we need to remember that our service unto God and our dedication to God is sacred. And I feel like when we have those things in perspective, that all will go well. Just like with Joshua, they took the renewing of the covenant serious. And they had the faith to commit to the covenant. And as we'll see next week, that it paid off when they went into Jericho. So I pray that we just take that with us, and we're mindful of this as we go forth in our walk. Amen? So at this time, we